We are reconvening we retired from closed session. We're reconvening the regular business meeting. At this time, I'll entertain any additions or deletions to the agenda. With none offered, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Okay, give that. Moved by Clerk Ranka and seconded by Trustee Budney. Any discussion? Those in favor of approving the agenda as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None offered. The agenda is approved. At this time, we are experimenting with a new board meeting format. At this time, we have two items, and just for purposes of recording this, at this time, we would invite public comment restricted to the action items on the agenda. Tonight, we have two action items, the resignation from the Downtown Development Authority and acknowledging a lender or a throughput for the funds for radio purchases for our first responders. So at this time, had anybody had comments to make on these action items, we would invite them to the podium. Again, comments would be restricted to those action items. If they hadn't contacted their favorite trustee or board member previously to make their feelings known, this would be the opportunity to do so. And as if on cue, Mr. Johnski, we have opened it to initial public comment, and you being the member of the public present. That being said, with no public comment offered, we'll step on to the consent agenda. Clerk Ranka.
I move that we approve consent agenda 13-029 containing number 1, containing the approved minutes of the February 25th, 2013 regular meeting, and number 2, the approved check register dated March 8th, 2013.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for the consent agenda and seconded by Trustee Smith. Any questions, comments from the board on the consent agenda? With none offered, those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None offered. Consent agenda is approved. Okay, now moving to our action items, and I will introduce both of them. First is to accept with regret the resignation of Mr. Ray Biddle from the Downtown Development Authority effective February 25th, 2013. I move we accept. And
second.
Okay, second by Trustee Budney. And Mr. Biddle has been an exemplary contributor to the Downtown Development Authority, but his business has just absorbed too much of his time. He felt he could not participate to the level he set for himself, and I'll just read his message to me. Brian has discussed several months back. During one of your visits to my store, I'm formally submitting my resignation from the Downtown Development Authority due to extensive business issues which prevent my ability to participate in the monthly meetings. The DDA is a great commission, and it needs full participation to move initiatives forward for this great township. Thank you. Respectfully, Ray Biddle. So, unfortunately, he does not have the time to participate anymore. Any comments, questions from the board on Mr. Biddle's resignation?
Just thank him for his service.
Yeah, will do. With that, I move we accept with regret the resignation of Mr. Biddle. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Again, Ray, thanks for your help, and I will not hesitate to stop by and seek your advice. Second action item, a little more involved. I propose that Grosse Ile Township amend the Downriver Community Conference / Downriver Mutual Aid interlocal agreements to allow entry into a lending agreement, and further to authorize Flagstar Bank to serve as a fiduciary agent for the purchase of 800 megahertz radios for our first responders.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Trustee Budney. Some background. The current DCC / DMA interlocal agreements do not include agreements with lending institutions that will affect member communities. Amending the interlocal agreements will allow the members of the DMA to purchase newer 800 megahertz radios, or redesign, required by the first responders through funds managed by Flagstar Bank. The actual source of the funds is the 9/11 surcharge on customers' phone bills, so it does not come out of our budget. It's a throughput from the collection agencies through Flagstar to the communities. And I invite Chief Murdoch, you probably handling both of them, much of it. And you can explain about the new 800 megahertz radios, where they fit in.
Back in around 2000, we bought 800 radios, and since then, Motorola...
800 megahertz radios.
Right. What has happened is Motorola, with their planned obsolescence, they're no longer supported. The software is not supported, the hardware is not supported, and we can't fix them. So DCC got together with both police and fire, and we decided to go back out for bid, which they let the bid. They've already purchased all the radios. It's in probably around $70 million project for the downriver area. It's all our mobiles in the police cars, my car, the fire trucks, ambulances, portables, infrastructure, base stations, all that kind of stuff. We wish we could have got a little bit more time out of the current 800 system, but Motorola is like a refrigerator. It's bound to go bad sometime or they're going to quit fixing it. So that's exactly what happened with this, with Motorola. We did go through about 5 or 6 vendors. We shopped and shopped and shopped, and Motorola is not our software people. Cassidian is out of Canada, if I'm not mistaken, but the hardware is all Motorola. So it's just, we have to replace them. Now, here's the key. The radios cost a fortune. The radios run about, I think they're almost close to $5,000 a crack. And the fire department alone has about 35 of them. But there's no out-of-pocket expenses this go-around. The first go-around there was. This go-around there's not. So Joe and I, there's nothing coming out of our budgets yet. So we'll see where this all lands. But they're supposed to start this project hopefully next month. They're supposed to start transferring us over in the software and hardware. So that's why we're doing this.
So I remember there was much discussion on contracting who would build the towers, where they'd locate them, who would run the command consoles, and there was a lot of work put into this. The radio purchase was just at the kind of the tail end of a very big revamp of interoperability, communication, all stuff we didn't know, we didn't have until we needed it.
The new radios definitely are better when it comes to interoperability. We can talk with the state of Michigan now, things of that nature where we couldn't before. We had a little bit of trouble getting on board with the state. The state wanted to buy the system. Downriver is a unique situation. It's a standalone 800 system. If you take Monroe County, they're all on the state system, and it's controlled by the state, and then they charge fees to the county to be able to operate on their towers, where DCC and the Downriver Mutual Aid Pack, we own it. It belongs to us. We control it, which is a whole lot better. So.
Okay, well, with that, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Budney.
Chief, just a quick question. How long do you think these radios will last?
Well, we're hoping for 20. Supposedly, when DC purchased this last group of radios, when the VH system was fading away, Motorola was already at a half-life. So that's kind of what happened with this whole project. So we're hoping for 20 years, but Motorola controls that when they decide they're not going to support us anymore.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments for myself, Chief, either of the chiefs? Clerk Ranka?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So are we approving the purchase of these radios, or are we approving a lending?
No. The purchase, you're approving the tie between us and DCC and the bank. They want resolutions or whatever you're going to do between each community back to DCC, so we're all on board.
And why was Flagstar?
I think it was the best for the interest rate is what they did. They shopped a bunch of banks.
It wasn't a single source bid to Flagstar then?
No, I don't think so. That's a little bit above my pay scale.
I think Flagstar was the only one willing to take on this duty for such a little surcharge that they added to handle all this purchasing funding. So what we're doing is, again, I said it was 2 parts. The amendment to the interlocal agreements, and I do have those available, but all they've done is, this was not a function of the ILAs until now to handle a lending, a fiduciary agent. So we added the paragraph, and I'll just read the paragraph. This will be added to both the Downriver Community Conference and Downriver Mutual Aid interlocal agreements. Those are the documents that established both of those entities. And the only change was the addition of this paragraph, quote, notwithstanding anything contained in this interlocal agreement to the contrary, DCC shall have the power and is authorized in its own name to make and enter into contracts for the purchase of services, equipment, and other real and personal property relating to the purposes of DCC, acquire, construct, manage, maintain, and operate buildings, works or improvements, acquire, hold or dispose of property, incur debts, liabilities, or obligations, including obligations for borrowed money, evidenced by banknotes or bonds, and grant security interest in, pledge, encumber, or otherwise convey any real or personal property now or hereafter owned by it. And the verbiage is the same where it said DCC was also DMA. So they're identical addendum to the interlocal agreements. So that was the first part, and the second part with that added to the interlocal agreements was the master acknowledgement and consent agreement, one from DCC and one from DMA, where they talk about the purchase through Flagstar, the purchase of these 800 megahertz radios, membership in the system, and again, using Flagstar Bank as the funding throughput from those dollars collected from your 9/11 surcharges on your phone bills through Flagstar to the communities to purchase these radios. So it's sort of a two-part, but one is obviously determined by the other. So I hope that reasonably explains it. Any other questions, comments for me? For the chief? All right, with none offered, those in favor of amending the Downriver Community Conference, Downriver Mutual Aid interlocal agreements to allow entry into lending agreements and to authorize Flagstar Bank to serve as the fiduciary agent for the purchase of 800 megahertz radios, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None offered. The motion's approved, and we'll get you your new radios soon, I hope. That will conclude our action items. So at this time, we'll step over to the clerk's report. Clerk Wright?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just as a general reminder, the clerk's office is open to accept passport applications. So if you need your passport renewed or a new one, please stop by the township and get that taken care of. There's a police commission meeting tomorrow night and a planning commission meeting on the 18th. We originally thought the next planning commission was earlier this month, but it turns out that it was scheduled on the 18th and not last Monday. So hopefully that didn't confuse anybody. That's it for the clerk's report.
Thank you, Clerk Ranka. Treasurer Van Oss is not here this evening. We'll then move to the trustee reports. Mr. Bundy.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. DPS does not have a meeting this month. It seems most of the commission has gone south to warm up a little and then come back. So our next meeting will be in April. The ZBA has 3 appeals. 2 weeks from tomorrow night is the ZBA meeting. We have 3 appeals, which really is a lot. All varied. Should be interesting. As usual, I would encourage the residents to pick a commission, and certainly our board meetings. Come out and join us sometime and see what your township is doing. And lastly, I just want to mention that tomorrow at 9 o'clock, a number of us will be over at the Park Lane Elementary School taking part in the Kiwanis-sponsored Read Around the World program. Chief Murdoch, Ms. Darzniak, Mr. Riem, myself, and Mr. Loftus and Mr. Duker, who only has a picture book, I understand, we'll be over there, and we'll have the great pleasure of being able to read to our younger residents of the island. It should be a lot of fun, and I'm very happy to participate in that. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Bundy. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I would like to invite everybody to run with me at the Rock CF Foundation's Dream to Outrun Cystic Fibrosis on March 23rd. This is the 3rd annual half marathon relay, and 5K run walk. It's your chance to support funding for cystic fibrosis research, raise money, much needed awareness, and get a healthy dose of running in the process. The half marathon is $60, starts at 8 a.m. Kids run on Grosio High School track is $20, and that's at 8:15. And the 5K run walk is $30 and starts at 8:30. If you need to find their website, your best bet is to just Google Rock CF on Grosio, and it'll take you right there. Communications Commission, as far as we're still working on the website RFP, and this is a very big job, so we're sorting through it and we're trying to make sure that we're going to bring forward the best recommendation. Our next meeting is this Wednesday, the 13th at 7 p.m. Festival Commission, our next meeting is March 20th at 7 p.m. And Tim had forwarded me the flyer for the vintage baseball game that's going to take place on June 1st, as well as some of the posters. So all the marketing materials are being developed and they look really good. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Moving on, Mr. Prozast.
I would like to speak to the Township Board this evening about the Horse Mill Bike Path and the process of getting it funded fully. As you know, we've been talking about this for the last couple of meetings, and just for history's sake, the path it's been about a 3-year project at this point, coming from paper to close to fruition now. And it's hit several roadblocks, and it didn't seem to discourage folks, and we've worked through the roadblocks, but one of those roadblocks was trying to obtain a grant fund to pay for some of the bike path, and although our bid was competitive, we were the first cut below the bids for grants for this time, so was one of the roadblocks. Construction costs were a little bit higher than we anticipated. We went back to our low bidder, and we found that he was willing to make some adjustments in the process and reduce some funds for us. We were able to talk through about $27,000 in reductions at that point. Great work by a couple of commission members. After that was done, we came back and put together a pencil and found that we were about $90,000, or somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000 short. And Dale is looking at me like, am I close to that? 94.5. Okay. All right. No. All right. So the way that we can go from not having this sufficiently funded is as follows. And these are suggestions. There is willingness on the part of the Department of Public Services to investigate providing $50,000 in drainage fund monies for this project and making it something that their commission has to look at. Unfortunately, Jim allowed all of those folks to go to Florida, and we can't have a meeting tomorrow night, so there's going to be a little bit of a problem with that, and I'd like to discuss this with the board. The other portion of the funding is a thing called the Metro Fund, the Metro Act Fund. It is as I was explained, a fund that allows people to use our properties for access to take care of their lines, and in return we're allowed to charge them a certain amount of revenue per year to cover the permitting costs and investigative fees for that fund. Well, that fund right now has an accumulated $43,504 in it, and I understand that it can be used for any bike path or any path-related or access-related project. So it is my suggestion on behalf of this commission that we ask the PSC to review the $50,000 that they have tentatively told us about, and they need to approve it, and then tap the Metro Act funds, and if that happens, we are within $1,000 or so of fully funding this 3-year-old project. That's close enough for horseshoes for me, and the only part of the equation is that with the PSC not meeting tomorrow, we would certainly love to get this project going, and would ask the board to consider making a loan of the $50,000 from general fund or drainage fund till such time as the commission can review and approve. Questions for me?
Wally, I just want to state, Wally and I have been talking about this, and this is, I think, probably one of the best projects that's ever hit Groseal. It's probably one of the few projects where a lot of people on Groseal use the bike paths. Having said that, I also believe that whether it's the bike path or anything else, when someone comes forth with a project, they should have the money to pay for that project. And when they come up short, we shouldn't, just from a good business standpoint, shouldn't be going and to other funds and trying to reclassify things to say, you know, oh, this is drainage, so let's let DPS pay for it. This is we'll cut down trees that open space won't have to do. Let's call that open space maintenance and get money from them. It's just not a good business practice, because it's just, I believe, smoke and mirrors. It's a bike path project, and they're short funds. I'm all for loaning the bike path committee the money to finish their project. They could use this Metro Act funds, which they get about $8,000 a year. They could use part of that over the future years to repay the loan, whether it's from DPS or whether it's from the general fund or wherever they get it. But it would get the project moving. It could fund whatever they need, and it could be paid back. I think it's really goes to the accountability of the people who are coming forth with the project, that they actually come up with the funds to do it. It's not only is it good for the community. We can't just look at, I don't believe we can just look at and say, oh, this is a good project, so it really doesn't matter where we pull the funds from. It does matter. You know, it's not good business. You wouldn't do this at home. You don't go out and say, I want to buy a new car, I want to buy a Cadillac, it's 50 grand. Oops, I only have 25, you know, you have to give me money or I'm going to take it from here so I can get my Cadillac. You got to come up with the funds, and this is a way to do it by doing it through a loan. And there is the ability for them, even without going back to the people, to pay for this down the road. So I think that's a good answer to their problem. But that's my position. Certainly, if anything's going to be done, whether it's, you know, if it's going to be taken from drainage funds, that's something that definitely has to go before the full DPS commission, and they have to make that decision on that. But I'm certainly behind this project, probably just take a different view of how it should be funded.
Jim, are you suggesting that we can either borrow or there is consideration to provide drainage fund funding to this outright?
I do not. I cannot sit here and say that the commission would not entertain, you know, using the term drainage fund, you know, drainage for the project and pay for it. I can't say that they wouldn't do that. I personally do not believe that's the right way to go. I believe we can loan you the money, and I'd be certainly on board to back that avenue and certainly talk on your behalf to that commission, as well as I know, Wally, I'm sure you'd be glad to come and talk to the commission. But I think that's a better way to go.
You know, you and I have talked so much about this, and what we've said is that there's several ways to skin this cat. And your way is one way, my way was another. And I think that we need to get more input from other members on the board. And, you know, the other thing that I sit here and think about is that we have a sizable amount of money in the drainage fund right now, and I haven't heard of any other projects that it's been dedicated to. And we're collecting money for drainage. Maybe we ought to use a little bit on Horse Mill Road.
Well, that's certainly one way to look at it. I guess I don't agree with you. I think, in fact, we could point to the reason you're short money is because a previous project took money from you, and now you're short. And, you know, it just shows that it's a bad business practice to do it that way. If you're going to come forth with a project, come forth, have the money, you know, like anything else, besides having the plans, you need the money, have the money, and pay for it.
Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So I think this is obviously a very worthwhile project, and I think the bulk of the money is certainly would come from the construction fund for the bike path. And if there's a shortfall there, which there is, then there's different options that I think we as a township board owe it to the residents to look at, and then make the decision on whether we think that's the right place for that funding or not. Certainly, there are drainage aspects of this funding. I think there's around $70,000 that Wayne County is throwing at us for making under road improvements that really have nothing to do with the bike path, but which will positively impact the corner where this is going on and the residents involved. So I think that is a legitimate drainage project. For the Metro Act account, certainly there is a lot of right-of-way, there's a lot of telephone poles and guy wires that do need to be moved on this project. So I think absolutely no problem pulling from those funds. So at the end of the day, I think it's absolutely a worthwhile project, and it's up to this board to to either find a way to make it work or to deny it. But I would look forward for the bike path to put together a proposal with a source of funding and bring it to the board.
It's our intention to take this as a discussion item, and it was right along, and trying to solicit the opinion of this board to see where we all sit on it. You know my position, you know Jim's position, you know Eric's position, and I'd certainly like to hear from the rest of you.
Well, I like the idea. I like the idea of expanding our paths and bikeways. I think it makes sense. Has something like this been done before at our township where we're borrowing money from certain funds?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And then what sort of stipulations or guidelines are put into place when a commission or a committee is borrowing from other sources of funding?
I guess I'll hand that over to the full-time staff. And the last big project we did was on the Safe Routes to School.
Right. We do borrow internally. We charge ourselves about 2% has been the local trend. There's also, you can just borrow against the maintenance. That is an option. There's money in the bike path fund as part of the maintenance that's available, so we can borrow against that and pay it back with Metro Act or some other means, but that's also available too. So if the drainage is an issue, you can just borrow within itself and pay it back through the Metro Act, if that's an option.
The previous subject of that someone had referred to about losing $75,000 is really the reason we're here talking about this tonight. If that 75 was still in the bike path construction funds, this had probably been going already. But I think that I'm asking the board to really look hard about making it happen. Some of the concessions that the contractor gave us was predicated upon building conditions right now, not when it gets real deep and muddy. And I think that the longer we delay it, the chances of it not getting done until late in the year would make it a real shame, because that's a path that a lot of people are going to use. I really believe in the bypass system. I've been involved in it, and Jack will will vouch for that, I hope, for more than 2 or 3 years now, huh? So let's ask the rest of our board members to chime in and see which direction you would like me to take.
Are you calling for a vote, which would be...
No, I'm asking for individual comment.
Well, I'm going to follow with our finance director, and we'll investigate sources. We have precedents in the past. I'm in favor of the bike pass. I'm in favor of completing the loop, getting as many in as possible. That separates our community from a number of other communities. We have been working hard in the promoting active communities. We have a group that volunteers, again, promoting active communities. That separates Grosse Ile from any one of a number of other places who don't have the real estate and the determination to make it easy for people to use other than automobiles to get around, whether for commerce or just plain recreation.
That's the same group that's working on this bike path.
Okay, and the Complete Streets Initiative, which has been, again, I won't call it an unfunded mandate, but certainly a serious recommendation to communities as they revise their traffic infrastructure to include non-motorized, pedestrian, bicycle, other means of transport for people to get around in their daily lives within the community. So there are overarching precedents that not only do we need to follow, we should want to follow, because I think it's going to make for a better community, a more desirable community, and a healthier lifestyle. So I guess if you're looking for count me in on finding ways to make this happen.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Please, Mr. Modesto.
I'm not opposed to borrowing money within the township from one department or the other. I would probably be opposed to the drainage fund, if in fact there is monies in the bike path maintenance fund that could complete the project. But my question would be, if it's going to be a loan, then what are the terms of repayment? Where is the repayment money going to come from?
The repayment money could come from this Metro Act, which they get, which they're going to use, hopefully use about $43,000, which I think is in the fund right now, for the bike path project. And then they get I believe it's around $8,000 a year in payment. And the suggestion was that we make it, not that they pay over the full $8,000 even, so that they do have some money there if they need to use it. But it is a source where they don't have to go back to, you don't have to go back to the people for a millage or anything like that. There's money there that could be used to repay this loan.
Well, it's just that if there's $40,000 from the Metro Fund,
Right.
and it's we're short approximately $95,000, that still leaves $55,000.
And that's where the borrowing would come in.
And that's where the borrowing would come in.
So they borrow the money and repay it.
So are we going to borrow the money from the bike path maintenance, or are we going to borrow it from drainage, or are we going to borrow it from general funding? Those would be my questions, and schedule for repayment.
That'd have to, that'd be decided. If you can borrow it from the bike path maintenance, I mean, it's their project, why not borrow it from themselves and pay themselves the interest?
It's going to be a while before we have a large enough bank account to start another bike path project.
Well, we don't have a...
Right,
there isn't. In fact, we don't even have a millage out there right now.
So, if we borrow the money from the maintenance fund, I'm not quite sure what that balance is right now. But then there was definitely a way of repaying itself. If it's adequate without draining it, and this Metro Fund will pay itself back.
Tom, it's about $450,000. So this would not by any means drain them.
Yeah, because what I would not want to see is all of a sudden a major drainage issue come up, and there's no money in the drainage fund, and now we got to find out where we're going to borrow money from to do the drainage project. I would rather consider borrowing money from the bike path maintenance fund, so that it's more or less supporting itself and paying itself back. Again, you and myself both know what took place in the past, and I just think going forward that would be to me, a better idea. But I'm open for discussion, and I am in full support of the bike path.
Well, we have consensus that we're all in support of it. How we're going to fund it is one of those things we're going to have to fine-tune. We've heard some good ideas. We will have to flesh those out, bring an action item before the board, and vote on it.
It'll be our intention to put that together for the next board meeting.
Very good. We'll be looking for it. Anything else, Mr. President?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the Promoting Active Communities project, the large survey is somewhere between 90 and 95% complete. And I know that Alan has been working pretty diligently getting with people to finish answering it, and we've got a deadline, I think, in June, so we're well ahead of that. I saw Woody and Wood. I just realized that interesting combination. But there's a wood cutting event this weekend. Would you like to tell us about it? Well, I will when I get it. Okay, that's fine. I won't take your thunder. And then finally, we had a nice joint communication session with the school board last week. And I want to thank all of those folks who got together and did some brainstorming. I appreciate it. I think we're going to we're going to see good things come from that first meeting. That's my report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Proziesk. Mr. Modesto.
Well, I want to keep it very short. I really don't have anything to say. Said enough already. But there are a few things coming down the road, or coming at us through the rec department. But nothing's nailed down right now, so to publicize it wouldn't serve any purpose. But I can just tell you that things are moving in a positive direction, thanks to Tim and the efforts with Dale and yourself, Brian. So that's it for me tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Modesto. Stepping over to Supervisor's report. First thing I want to proudly announce is the annual meeting, Grosse Township, will be held on Monday, March 25th. Start with a reception at 6:30 downstairs in the Township Hall. Annual meeting will begin at 7:15, where we discuss annual meeting topics, and then step to the regular business meeting following that, probably around 8 p.m. Everyone is invited. Hope to see you there. We have flyers posted around Township Hall that look like this and iterates what I just said. But I hope to see you there. It's something of a tradition. Annual meeting is not exactly the annual meeting that the state legislature had in mind in 1847, because our township board does most of the legislative act rather than once a year, bringing, at the time, a township might have had 15 or 20 residents. It was easy to get them together in a church or a one-room schoolhouse, and they would vote. All the residents would vote on various issues before the township. Obviously, we would have trouble doing that these days, so most of the legislation is handled by your Board of Trustees with your inputs. But it's a great tradition, and we will hopefully see you on March 25th. Other odds and ends, since Mr. Clark has volunteered to explain the wood cutting, I'll step over that. A couple of flyers in the back of the room, still the AARP's Downriver Tax Preparation. That flyer is there. If you are an AARP member, and I think if you're 35, you qualify. I think that's when I started getting the flyers. But anyway, tax preparation, income tax is getting more rather than less difficult. DCC, Energy Assistance Program, hasn't been too well accessed in Grosse Township. We don't hear about it too much, but some of the other communities, it's been very successful. It's really helped people out. So I do have a flyer in the back of the room. There are eligibility requirements to apply for this, but if you think you qualify and would like to weatherize your home, please pick up one of the flyers. It can't hurt to ask. We have Rec Department Easter egg hunt is Saturday, March 23rd. Please get a reservation for this. It's a lot of fun. It's over at the Water's Edge, and it's a good time. It's for the kids, so bring them all. Blessing of the bicycles. While we're on the bike path topic, I was part of this last year. It's great fun. Sunday, April 21st. At St. James Presbyterian Church, our police reserves will be there to support us. It begins with a blessing of the bicycles by Father Phil, a briefing on the short bike route, a little safety lesson for young and old alike. Every so often we have to remind people that bicycles are vehicles and you have certain restrictions and privileges. Ride with traffic, walk against traffic. That's the kind of the short version. But it's a good time, and I hope to see you there. I have some stuff from Wayne County on their hazardous waste collection, but again, the nearest one, the next one is April 13th, but it's over at Redford Public Services. None of them are really close, so I'm going to see if I can convince somebody to have one nearby, and that's where you get rid of stuff like household paints, dyes, floor wax, furniture polish, pharmaceuticals, nail polish, all the stuff that you really don't want to surprise the people from Waste Management with in your trash cans. So that concludes my report. A lot going on. Again, hope to see a good turnout for the annual meeting, March 25th. This time I'll turn it over to Township Manager, Mr. William.
Thank you. I have two brief items. The first, I've been asked several times the past week or two regarding the status of the MIOSHA investigation of the death of James Farrell. There's a final conference recently held, and it'll be 30 to 60 days before we get the written report. So that is still in process. I've been asked to make comment, and I guess my comment is we're not making comment until we have the formal records, the formal documentation from the state investigation. So that is in process. And the second item is, Mr. Clark, there are no legal fees on the agenda this evening.
No, sorry, no legal fees, so...
No legal fees?
Sorry. But you can stay, though. Don't go, Woody, because I want you to talk about the wood cutting.
Save some money?
That's all.
So far. And again, on the Myosha investigation, please, none of us are going to comment because anything we would say would be unsubstantiated. We haven't received the written report, and nothing matters till we get the written report. So, and when we have it, it'll be available. So with that, I'll open it up to public comment. You know the rules. Introduce yourself. 3 minutes. The meter's running, and Mr. Clark. Actually, your announcement, I won't hold it against your time, Woody, because you're doing us a public service.
Oh, goody.
On the wood cutting.
Okay, there's no legal fees. Okay, wood cutting is going to be at 3/16, 9 to 4. Now, if it rains like today, it's going to be on the 23rd. Because, there's no sense going out there when it's pouring rain.
It's too dangerous.
Yeah. Okay, Horse Mill, East River, the corner, Wayne County knows about the guardrail, the one that somebody wanted to knock half of it down. And it's been there for about a month now. Right, Joey?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Nate's, I'd like to see more people at Nate's. We don't want to lose that store. And how much money was in the bike path? Because a long time we've been talking about this. I heard it was like $270,000 or something like that.
It's a little over 253.
And you've had that
In the
for...
construction fund.
Huh?
In the
construction fund, right. And you want to borrow, what, another 100,000?
No, more
Well,
like
yeah, I mean, I know you got to shuffle it. You got to shuffle it from this place like you did everything else we do. We shuffle it from one organization to another, and then we pay it back. Sort.
That way we get things done, and we don't have to go outside to borrow.
Right. Okay, just like the bridge. That shuffle.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Other public comment? Yes, sir. I recognize your face, but I'm drawing a blank.
Gary Bailey, 9864 Island Drive. I just want to thank the board for approving my nomination to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you.
You're going to be busy, so there's a bunch of them hitting the docket. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Other comment from the public president, Mr. Janowski?
Mr. Bailey, more important, thanks for doing that thankless job.
Ron Janowski, Grow Road. How much is the bike path project on Horse Mill? Total.
393 and change.
Okay. We have a budget, and then and we have investments, and in years past, I've heard that we have actually went into our rainy day fund a little bit at a time. Do we still do that?
We do. If necessary, we do for some, it depends on
To meet our budget?
we have the last couple of years. We
Okay.
had to, if we wanted to keep the police fully funded and keep the township operating, yes.
Well, why do we keep spending money then? Why are we depleting our savings account until we get things up and running and things get a little bit better?
That's just a short version. That's why we have a cash reserve, and the board has unanimously supported those expenditures.
But weren't we on the verge of having to do a deficit reduction plan for the
No.
township? No?
No.
You sure? Okay, I'll look into that. By what standards do we build these bike paths? Because if you go up and down Grow, which we sort of renovated here a couple of years ago, and on Meridian, I'm kind of concerned with this drainage fund. How does that relate to the bike paths?
They're separate funds.
No, I mean, how does it relate? What does it have to do with drainage, putting in a bike path?
If the proposed location of the bike path would impede drainage, if we have a drainage issue, we're going to be doing construction there, we will have to abate the drainage. Mr. Rankin, did you want to?
I just say in this particular incident, Wayne County, in order to approve the permits for the bike path, made us do some drainage improvements underneath Park Lane at the intersection of Horse Mill and Park Lane.
So we'll eliminate some drainage problems that we have
Yeah.
by putting in a bike path.
Yes.
Okay, in this particular case?
in this particular case.
Because several years ago, I've got some videos and some pictures when we renovated the bike path on Meridian, and before it was even completed, we had several spots that were underwater. Now, that leads me to believe that and it was told to me that the bike path was put in that position because they did not want to raise it, and that they put it at the same level that the ground is, the surrounding, ground levels, which don't make sense. I mean, if the ground's underwater, you put the bike path underwater, and now they're failing. You go up and down Grow Road, and probably 16 inches from the edge in towards the middle are failing. They're sinking. Do we have, or do we hold the engineers that design this, that are going to go through a particular area to build this to some specifications where they're not going to fail? I've been doing some work out in Oakland and Macomb counties, and I've kind of, I took an interest in looking at their bike paths, and they're quite old, and they've held up quite well. Are we doing it to the same standards, or are we going to build something that, well, I guess one of my questions is, how long does a bike path supposed to last? Nobody knows? We're going to spend $400,000, but we don't know how long a bike path is supposed to last?
It's like a road. It depends on a lot of things.
Like what?
Depends on a lot of the
Well, riding a bicycle and walking and having a dog go up down there, it should last forever, in my opinion. Otherwise, we're wasting our money. But the bike paths, some of the bike paths are failing terribly. All I'm saying is, I'm for bike paths. Don't start writing up an article saying that Ron Janowski's against bike paths, because I use them all the time. But I like them to last, and I don't want to spend any money on something that's going to last 2 or 3 years. Then we're going to have to use our maintenance funds to repair them and go over them. All the ones that I've looked at are quite old and in quite good shape, not like ours. Are we addressing that problem?
Mr. Supervisor.
Excellent question, Mr. Posiask.
All I can tell you, Ron, is that we have an engineering company we build to their spec, and their spec is a state spec.
It is a state spec.
The same spec that Oakland County builds to.
Why are ours failing?
I think that perhaps you haven't seen all of Oakland's.
Pardon me?
You may have not seen all of Oakland's.
Okay. With that, you're 4.5 minutes into your 3 minutes, Mr. Janowski, so I've brought up some good points. We have some research to do. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Oh, by the way, the feds are all done down in Detroit, so they got a lot of time on their hands.
Okay, armed with that knowledge, any other public comment? With none offered,
Who came tonight?
with none offered, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Budman.
Second.
Second by Clerk Ranka. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? We stand adjourned, and I'll make it 8:24. Good night, everyone. Hopefully see you at the annual meeting, March 25th.